Hey, I'm Midnight, I'm a Deadlock coach. I've been coaching in Deadlock for over a year, and today I want to go through the most efficient way to improve, which is self-VOD reviewing. Now, why should you self-VOD review? A lot of people want coaching, and coaching is the best way to improve, but short of coaching, self-VOD review is the best way. Even if you don't think you'll see a lot of your own mistakes, I promise you, just try this once, and you'll notice a lot more mistakes than you think. Every time I'm coaching someone, they're noticing their own mistakes, saying, hey, I shouldn't have been here, I shouldn't have done this, I'm underutilizing this ability. As far as how often you should self-VOD review, I generally recommend twice a week. However, if you don't really want to VOD review, once a week will suffice. And if you're one of those unemployed people who plays 12 games of Deadlock a day, doing about one VOD review session for every 10 games you play is also a pretty decent rule of thumb. Your real goal when you VOD review is you want to come away with a few notes that you are going to focus on until the next VOD review. These I will highlight in the next sections. I call them core mistakes or just very common mistakes. And finally, if you do really want to min-max your improvement, again, the best way to improve is doing coaching and self-VOD reviewing at the same time. And if you want 1 month of free coaching along with access to multiple free weekly coach scrims, it is the first link in the description. Okay, so you want to start self-VOD reviewing, but the first question is, how do you pick a good VOD? Well, there's a few different criteria to start with. For this example, I'm going to be using one of my friends. He's around Oracle, so this will be a slightly above average example. So to start off, we can see he's been playing a lot of the new mode, as I'm sure all of us have, but we have 3 games to work with. First thing to look for, he is a Wraith main, but he's been playing a ton of Billy recently. He's been on a Billy arc, and whatever character you're playing, that's the character you should review, so you can remove this Wraith game from the pool. Now it's between this Billy win and this Billy loss. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at the scoreboard. Now there's a pretty standout factor in this game, which is just this Ivy has hard carried the lobby. Obviously this game is just not a good one to review because you got hard carried. Any game where you get hard carried, or I believe that this is a duo queue or trio queue lobby, it's much better if you're looking at a solo queue lobby, and then in general just a lobby where you don't get hard carried. An exact opposite applies. You also don't really want to look at a game where you just like turbo carried yourself and you're like 20-0 and all of your teammates are like 0-5. There's an old rule in hero shooters. It doesn't quite apply to this game as much because it's a MOBA, which involves a lot more snowballing, but the old rule is a 30-30-30 rule, which is 30% of your games you have control over, 30% you can't win, and 30% you can't lose. So this would be a game, we're just looking at this game, I don't think he could have lost this, and there'll be a lot of opposite games where you did insanely well, but you just rolled some bad teammates, and although maybe if you played an Eternus level, you could have carried those, it's just not worth looking at how you could have min-maxed a game to play like absolutely perfectly when you have a game next to it where you played subpar. Now looking at the second game, we can see it's again still party queue, so if you have the options, I'd avoid this, but he hasn't been queuing that much on the newest mode. But this game looks a lot better, predominantly because everyone just did about average. There's some players that maybe didn't do as great, and there's some players that excelled slightly, but generally everyone did okay. You 100% had the opportunity to carry this game if he had played at his maximum capacity. One other thing to mention before we actually get into this review and talking about how to analyze this review is that really good games to analyze are ones where there's a big swing, where you are winning for a very long time and then there's a massive swing. This is actually the perfect game where it isn't that big of a lead, but you can see from the 13th minute, Amber has a pretty significant lead, and they lose it on what I am assuming by this pretty massive swing is a 32-minute fight. Any game where you are winning, normally by a margin bigger than this, then there's a big turn, is great to look at because you can look at if you utilize that advantage correctly and where you went wrong in losing that advantage. Now, how often should you VOD review? I generally recommend you should VOD review once a week. It's not bad at all to do it twice a week. If you like VOD reviewing, do it twice a week. It's great. But at the point where you're getting to 3 or 4 times a week, you're really getting diminishing returns, and there's a certain point where it's just better to play the game. Another big issue people have with self-VOD reviewing is that it takes a lot of time. So if you're a very busy person that needs to get back to terrorizing your teammates in solo queue, there's a quicker way to VOD review. I generally recommend just doing a full VOD review. However, it's better to do some kind of VOD review than no VOD review, so all you do for a simple and quick-paced VOD review is you just forward to all of your deaths, which are the red little dots on the timeline marker. You can also use this menu to select through different, like, hey, you think you're underutilizing your ability. Let's check, how many times did we ult this game? We ulted 1, 2, I mean, there's like a, break here, probably an issue with not ulting, but generally the ult utilization looks fine. If we check an item like Cult to Sacrifice, again, a little bit, I mean, we're probably just dead here, so this all looks great as well. But as far as how to look at a death, you'd go right before this death, about, I don't know, let's say 30 seconds before. We would look at what happened, wait till it catches up, then we press play, and basically what we want to ask ourselves is, why did this death happen? Was the death worth it? For example, if you trade for an objective or a walker or something, that is worth it, and could it have been prevented? I'm gonna pause already, and I'm gonna tell you how I think this Billy's gonna die. I see Dynamo has ult, also we're about to grapple them into us. I would expect Dynamo's going to ult us, and this would be an issue of not paying attention to your enemy's abilities and not just thinking like, okay, whenever you see a Dynamo, I mean, for one, whenever you're in lane, you should be tracking the enemy's ults, but whenever you see a Dynamo, you should be spacing him and thinking he is going to ult us. So I have a feeling Billy's going to pull him in, Doorman's going to walk up to capitalize off of the chain gank, Dynamo's going to press ult, and they're going to die. Let's see how this plays out. Oh, okay, looks like it didn't happen off the chain gank. The chain was broken. But I still have a feeling this death is going to come from a Dynamo ult. There's a kick. Melee, I mean, he stumbled the parry. Second heavy melee comes slightly late, but yeah, there's the Dynamo. We're just walking way too close in his face. Insane we get the kill. If this Billy had pop blasted slightly sooner, he also would have lived. So what we can analyze from that death is, like I said previously, he should have been aware that Dynamo had ult up, and he shouldn't have been just running at him, running in his face, especially while they're both relatively low. It's hard for the Doorman to really follow up well when if he walks up, he's dead to one, like Dynamo kick. Let's say Carbine. Next, it's also a little bit of underutilizing your abilities, where if this ability had pop blasted off of his parry, the healing he got from the double heavy melee would have been 180 health. That therefore would have allowed him to survive the Dynamo kick, and no, this death was not worth it, and this death was highly preventable. Another very small note here is just in general when you're VOD yourself, but especially for this type of VOD review, as we would get into the later deaths, where, you know, maybe you get ganked or something, is you should press F2 and it will turn on whatever characters you're spectating's information. So as you can see, we see, you know, this Billy's information before he died on map, and we don't see like Geist is at our tower. Now we're gonna start with the most common issues in lane. I would say the most common issue by far, and one we're already seeing from this Billy, is just taking way too much trooper damage. If I go to 10 minutes, this is I think slightly glitched. It was saying 500 before. This damage timer can be slightly finicky. If you just start from the start of the game and you watch, the damage timer should work. Sometimes if you rewind and then take more damage, it'll double up the numbers because it'll count it twice. But if you skip around, sometimes it gets a little finicky. Yeah, now it's looking a little better. But as you can see, this Billy's taken 600 damage from troopers by minute 6. That is 100 damage per minute. That is 100 damage per minute. That is very preventable. So the laning stage ends whenever the first tower falls, but generally when I'm tracking stats, I just go up to 9 minutes, because in my experience, that's when the average tower falls. Although again, it's kind of an arbitrary number, but I like tracking from just a set time frame, and 9 minutes is just the number that works for me. If you prefer, maybe you're in a lower elo or laning stage, tends to go a little longer, and you prefer 10 or 11 minutes. It doesn't really matter what minute you choose. Just whenever you're analyzing stats, gonna choose 1 minute and work from it, so you always have consistent data and you're not changing any variables. Now, by 9 minutes, I say the first step, I mean, you can see this Billy is already going to exceed this goal, but the first step I say is you should shoot for less than 600 trooper damage. I think the average player takes 100 trooper damage per minute, so that'd be, you know, 900 by 9 minutes. And I think first you should shoot for 600 trooper damage. Later in the graph section of this guide, I will check how to look at your trooper and tower damage. But basically, I say first shoot for 600, then when you can get to 600, try to get it below 400. And at that point where you're taking 400 or less trooper damage by minute 9, you're in a pretty good spot. Trooper damage can always get lower, but there is sometimes the trooper damage is going to be good, like if you're jumping into an enemy 1 HP and you're killing them when they're like 100 HP, but you're taking like 150 to troopers. That's going to inflate your trooper number, but it also is worth the damage. So again, I just generally say if you're doing less than 400, you're at a great spot, but until you're like Oracle or Phantom, just shoot for less than 600. The next issue also involves wave, which is just hitting wave, and if the enemy waves are permanently crashing into you, that is an issue. If you're playing a weak laner like Dynamo and you're into 2 strong laners like Yamato Paradox, they are normally going to have lane advantage. However, you should expect 2-ish troopers to be crashing into your tower on average. But however, even in a very losing lane like this, there really shouldn't be a time where more than 2 troopers are crashing into your tower. And if you are having that issue, you can buy monster rounds, which gives you extra damage to NPCs, which is very, very good for clearing wave. And if you're noticing a ton of waves are crashing into you, always buy that. But the ideal structure of wave is that you always have wave prow and you always focus hitting wave first, and then after you've killed their troopers and you have your wave pushing into them, that's when you look for aggressive trades, and especially that is the ideal time to use your abilities. Because for example, on Paradox, if you pop your Carbine when wave is pushing into their tower, they either have to peek you to hit the wave and you get a free Carbine, or they don't peek you for its 4-second duration and your teammate and your minions just get 4 seconds of free damage on tower. Now if you do something and you're not quite sure it's correct, or you think it might be a mistake, what I recommend is you either go to Twitch and find a high level main of your character, or if you don't know a high level player who plays your main, you can go to Stat Locker, go to this right bar, go to leaderboards, go to Valve Hero Leaderboard. Now what you want to do is you want to go to all heroes, and we're using Billy for this example, so I will just search Billy, and you can see, I don't know who this guy is, it doesn't show his PP score. First person is Cran, you can either go to Cran's Twitch, or say you don't know Cran's a streamer, you would click on his profile. Now you can see Cran doesn't have any Billy games on his homepage, so we'll click this little thing for filters, and we will go to Heroes. We will again select Billy, just click Apply Filters, give it a second, and then you can see, you know, Billy standard game. We'll click on this. It'll take a second again. And Stalker is a little slow right now, I think because of the API changes. It's been a little rough, but it will come up eventually. Okay, if it stays black, just reload the page. It's having some small issues, but you can see the match ID is right here. Just click on it, copy it to your clipboard. Then you would just go to this watch projector in the right of the hideout, search for match ID, enter the match ID, download the replay, and watch it. Now, when laning stage is when the first tower falls, so this is when you want to look for the first mid-game issues. The first issue you will see from a lot of players is just overstaying in your lane. Once one tower breaks in your lane, there is no longer your lane. One character should anchor, so the wave isn't allowed to permacrash in the objective, but you want that to be the M1. In this comp, Ivy's a good anchor, McGinnis is a good anchor, Billy's a good anchor, while Dorman, Vindicta, and Calico really want to roam more and look more aggressively. Vin because she wants to get stacks of her snipe, Calico because she's highly mobile. What makes a good anchor character is for one, a character that wants to farm and scale well with souls. For example, in this game we have any M1 being Ivy, 7, or Haze, or any character with very good anti-siege like McGinnis, Geist, or again Ivy, who can just very quickly clear a wave, while a character like Vindicta wants to be more active because she wants to get souls off her snipe, or a character like Paige, because she's a support, wants to roam more actively to support her teammates, and she doesn't really care about scaling with souls. But when Paradox has ult up, she wants to roam to another lane to look for picks with her ult. Second minor note, if you are roaming, you want to roam to a lane that's winning, not a lane that's losing. Roaming to a lane that's losing and then dying because they're losing is a very good way to throw your advantage. Next up, if you kill their tower first, especially before the 8-minute mark, what you want to do is you want to invade the enemy's Sinner Sacrifices, which are just these little boxes right here. If you're a mid lane, it's just these two next to mid, or if you're in the side lane, just the one next to the enemy's now broken Guardian. The opposite applies where if you lose your tower before the 8-minute mark, you want to make sure you are really securing your own Sinners and making sure the enemies can't steal them. Just make sure whenever you're invading a Sinners or stealing a Sinners, you shove out the wave first so you can't get dove on it. Now we're going to move into the true mid and late game. There's a lot of things to look for in your mid and late game, so I have made a list of what I think are the most common mistakes. First up, the most common mistake you will see in Deadlock is overfighting. If you notice that every time you die and you hit that skip 60 seconds button, you are in a fight, you are overfighting. If you're a character that's strong in the mid games like Abrams, you do want to look for more aggressive brawls, but you want to make sure that those brawls have a purpose. For example, are you going into the enemy's jungle with your pick character, trying to steal the enemy's Sinner Sacrifices or just general farm, and then you end up getting in a brawl? And if you do get in a brawl, are you taking what is called an at-best fight, which is very bad? For example, if this Calico was going to fight the Haze, ignoring the health differential, Calico knows for a fact that she doesn't have any teammates that aren't like, I don't know, Ivy's about 7 seconds away from her. But because Calico has no information on the enemy team, she has no idea if Haze has any teammates nearby her. But if we turn on the map, we can see Geist is right next to the Haze. So if Calico was to take this at best 1v1, it would be at best a neutral fight, where she knows she doesn't have any backup, and even if in theory Calico wins the 1v1, when Geist shows up, it's no longer a one fight. So if you are taking brawls, again, making sure they're clearly over an objective, being invade, earn, or mid boss, or you have a clear advantage, that being a player advantage, you see 4 on the other side of the map, you know this is their weak side, so you want to fight them, or a very strong ult or health advantage. The next biggest mistake goes hand in hand with this, which is over rotating. If your whole team is taking a big fight on the left side of map, and you are on the right side, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go sprint across map to the left side to try to join this fight, or you're like 20 seconds out and by the time you show up, the fight is already over. What you do want to do is you want to push the enemy's objective and put pressure on the opposite lane. Again, say the fight was happening left side and Haze was mirroring this Calico, so she couldn't actually siege the Walker or trade the Walker for the fight. What Calico should do is she should put pressure, shove her wave aggressively into the enemy. Because the enemy team is showing so many left side, she is allowed to do that. And then after she shoved the wave into the enemy, she should go and look to invade any of this jungle on the right side. But just making sure if your team's taking a big fight, especially on the opposite side of the map, you're getting some value and not either rotating across the map or just farming your own camps way in the back line. Which ties to the next note, farming macro. First off, at this point in the game, if you're farming a camp, you always want to prioritize your more aggressive camps. For example, Doorman farming the Sinners is good. It's one of these aggressive frontline camps where if the enemies want to steal any jungle, they're gonna look for this. It'd be a lot worse if Doorman was sitting back here farming this tier 3. You always want to prioritize farming your more aggressive camps, and then if you see enemies somewhere else, and more ideally if you just have wave prow, making sure you're using that wave prow to steal enemy jungle. The flowchart should be you shove waves into the enemies, you steal their jungle, and as wave pushes back, you keep farming your jungle, making your way back. You don't want to farm your jungle and then go invade, because then you are bringing a bag of your jungle into the enemy's farm, which is really bad versus taking a bag of the enemy's jungle into your farm. Next thing you want to look for is, are you getting jumped a lot? If you see you keep getting jumped, you keep getting collapsed on, but you're looking at your map and either you are pushed up way too aggressively in front of your teammates. Next up, a very common mistake is wasting advantages and not getting objectives. If you get one kill or just one small advantage, you should run Earn. If Earn is not up, you should use your advantage to try to steal some of the enemy's jungle. If you notice that there's a lot of the time where your team kills 1, 2, 3 players and your team isn't really doing anything, they're farming their own farm, they're playing really passively, that is wasting your advantages. And obviously the flagship of this mistake is not doing mid boss when you should. My general flowchart for mid boss is post 18 minutes if you get 2 picks on top of mid, go mid boss, post 22 minutes if you get 2 picks anywhere, go mid boss, and post 28 if you get 1 pick anywhere, go mid boss. This does change slightly if they have something like Dynamo ult that can completely change the fight. You don't want to go mid when they have Dynamo ult unless you have like 3 or 4 picks, or obviously it's offline. And when it's offline, you can force more aggressive mid bosses because you kind of need to get that thing off the table when Dynamo ult isn't on it. And then the next 2 notes are most common in M1s. The first one, I'm sure we've all complained about, it's over farming. You see this a lot in lower elo, where the M1 will just be farming instead of being in the fight. However, this mistake is often misconstrued. As an M1, if your team is fighting, you don't necessarily want to be in that fight. Quite often, when your team is running Earn, it's better for you to be on the opposite side of map, putting pressure on the side lanes, stealing the enemy's jungle, just creating pressure, shoving into their walker. If no one mirrors you, you take the walker, your team backs off Earn, you get a walker, you slow play Earn, and it's better for you. That's also why you should be the ones running Earn, because then you don't even have to lose Earn for the walker. But normally, their M1 should mirror you, and it should be a deadlock, and then you guys should just kind of shove in waves and go farm, which is net better for you because you guys want to utilize your farm. However, if you're not in core important fights, which are fights where your team has a very significant advantage, or fights that are over a very important objective like mid boss, you should always be in those fights. There's no point where your team should be contesting mid boss and you should be in your jungle. So if you find a lot of the time your team is taking a fight where they're dead 3 and your team is taking an amazing fight and you're just hitting a camp on your side of the map, or your team's in mid boss and you're just mindlessly farming watching your second mod or YouTube video, that is an issue. And then next up, on the opposite side of that issue, is bag awareness, where you are getting a massive bag in your jungle, you are then going to fight them and you are throwing a Louis Vuitton at them. You need to make sure you are not fighting when you are sitting on a massive bag, or just in general a mass amount of souls. Actually very convenient that at this time Billy just took a fight while sitting on 6.4k souls. Billy should have gone back to buy. He should have not been pushing that aggressively into their walker while sitting on a full item. Now a couple of tips for helping your VOD review. If you want to record yourself, you can narrate your own thought process, which can really help if you want to determine like what was your decision making, or should you have made that decision. And then also, if you like to duel with someone consistently, assuming they're around similar elo to you, just switching VODs and VOD reviewing each other can also be a nice way where they'll see mistakes that you didn't see yourself. Now let's talk about the final thing, which is graph analysis. I am generally not going to compare you to flat numbers because the line just goes up and it changes as you get in different elos. So what I want you to do is I want you to compare yourself to your teammates. Are you an M1? If so, is the game 40 minutes? Are you 10k above your teammates? So for example, in this game, Ivy was the M1. She is below most of her teammates, which means she did not farm efficiently enough. Her issue was she just did not farm. As an M1, you should be on average like 10k above your teammates. Although if the game's shorter, you can look for like 8k, but you should always be at least, by the end of the game, you should be at least 6k above your teammates or one tier 4 item if you are an M1, because you just want to be farming, you want to be scaling. This is where you can see damage from players. If you go to 9 minutes, that little gray number is how much you took from troopers, denizens, and towers. Denizens just being the camps. It's better to go into your game and look at trooper damage, because as you can see, this is 2k, even though I believe Billy only took like 1k from towers. Nicta only took 600 from troopers, but she took another 900 just from camps because this guy loves turbo farm. So it is like slightly obscured. Means is also very high because I think she took like 500 from tower this game. So it's better to just go into your lobby and check trooper damage. This is gonna be kind of a rudimentary way to check your trooper damage. You can see Paige has 800. Again, this is a high amount. Page's was pretty much just trooper damage, which is, again, is too much trooper damage for a Paige. It's just raw trooper damage. I don't think she farmed a camp or got hit by towers. This is an accurate representation of trooper damage. Another stat I really like to look at is denies. As you can see, the enemy's got 6 denies in this lane. They are winning by a lot, so in general this means that the Billy and Dorman aren't really confirming enough souls. And then also this Billy has 0 denies. I generally say shoot for 3 denies. 2 denies is fine, but if you have 0 or 1 denies, you need to focus on denying more and making sure you're securing those soul orbs. And now back to comparing with your teammates. I mean, in general, this is too many deaths. We're in a 40-minute game, and these guys have 10, 9, 9, 5. You can see Vindicta only died 4 and 5 times. Well, these 3 have died quite a bit more. If you're frontline, you're gonna be dying more. As far as deaths, it's kind of hard. Again, if we're going back to comparing with your teammates, like this game, this Billy died 9 times. His average team's death was probably like 7, 8 maybe. These two obviously are much smaller, and in general, your backline, I mean, Calico maybe should be a little higher, but your backline is going to be very low, and your frontline is going to be a lot higher. I do think 9 deaths at this point in the game is a little too many. In a 40-minute game, 9 deaths as frontline is okay. You could probably get this lower. He definitely wasn't having the best game. You could definitely get this to like 7. And like as an M1, IVs should definitely be a lot lower. But in general, you should shoot for your frontline being about 2 deaths in front of your average team, which again, this guy is, and your backline should be about 2 deaths below, which again, the issue being that Ivy was not, and Dorman was not either, while these two, I mean, and then Vindicta is, you know, very low. Again, Vindicta is going to be an exception. Also, we look at this team, again, you can see 7 died way too much. You can see there's just an issue with them dying. This is when I would recommend doing one of those quick VOD reviews where you just check all your deaths and see if they are preventable. Well, honestly, the rest of his team seems like they died a pretty good amount and like adequate amount, right? I would say 6 deaths on Geist in a 40-minute game is slightly below par. Again, my arbitrary par being about 7 deaths in a game this long. Next thing to look for is kill participation. If you're an M1, this will be a little skewed because again, you do want to farm. But for example, Billy has 14 assists, 9 deaths, so in total he's participated in 23 kills. His team has 10, 19, 23 plus 16. His team has 39 kills. So he has a kill participation of about like 55%, which I would say is good. You can also look at this stuff in Stat Locker. But 50, I mean, just a shoot for an above 50% kill participation, especially if you're like a pick character, your kill participation should be like 60% or higher. But if you're like a frontline or just any character that isn't an M1, I would say just shoot for above 50%. If you're in a lower elo, it's actually not necessarily bad if you're lower kill participation because teams tend to take a lot of terrible fights. And if your team is taking just a horrible, miserable fight, coin flip mid, whatever, and you can use that pressure to split the enemy walker or split the enemy objective, that is better. One final note is I want to give a lot of credit to Baxel. His self-VOD review guide inspired me to make this video, and his method of finding high-level VODs is one I also use and explain in this video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. This has been my self-VOD review guide. If you want free coaching, join the Discord, join Gosu, top link in the description. Both me and Gosu offer a lot of free coaching. Sorry this was a little more scatterbrained than I would have liked. I think I'm going to work on a guide for any new players coming back to Deadlock next. So if you liked the video, you know what to do, and as always, keep it real.